Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance, and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group and Miner. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nephology podcast. We are now on series 3, and this is episode 1 with my good friend Ayman. Ayman, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for having me.
Good to do this. We've chatted a lot, in different areas of life and doing different things, and we both presented on Saturday to an accounting firm here on different subjects. So we do a lot of stuff together. So nice to sit down and chat.
Yeah, definitely. We also both came to Dubai around the same time, didn't we?
True. Yeah, that is true. So kind of on that journey together. Yeah. So I guess first of all, let's give the listeners and the viewers like a bit about you, your background, and also scope and what you're doing with them.
Yeah, sure. So Ayman Kaouri, I've kind of been in this whole tech space for pretty much all my career, even from when I was a young kid, to be honest. I remember like from when I was 2, my mum sat me down on her lap when she was working from home and got me to type away. And I remember when I was 8, I started programming and fixing all the computers at home if anything went wrong. My parents were both kind of in this whole software space, so it was kind of inevitable. I mean, when I started out, when I went to university, I did computer science, and I started out being a coder. And when I first worked as well, that was the space I went into.
Okay.
But soon afterwards, I kind of moved away from the more technical side of it and moved more into like the management and then go to market side of things. So then before last year, I was working for Xero over in the UK for about 5.5 years there. Variety of different roles, but the most recent one was as the head of kind of new EMEA kind of hub region, which was essentially emerging markets in the EMEA space. I was basically just trying to grow Xero's footprint in non-core markets in EMEA. And then just kind of saw really good opportunities out here in the UAE. And I always thought, you know what, there's lots of potential out here. So when I left Xero last year, I already had a relationship with the team at Scope over in Malta from my time at Xero. They'd done an amazing job essentially helping accounting practices and SMEs digitalize and helping them move away from old, traditional, more manual, let's say analog ways of working to this whole new digital way of working. And done really well over in Malta, and they're up for a new challenge. So we kind of went into business together over here in Dubai. And yeah, so here we are here. We're basically primarily now trying to help accounting firms on that digital transformation journey and any SMEs as well that we can touch as well.
Yeah, okay. So it isn't just the accounting market. It is, you would go direct to SMEs and things like that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that was a natural progression. So we started out like targeting and going after accounting firms because that's where we felt there was the most value. But also they're often the most trusted advisor, or they ought to be the most trusted advisor to lots of SMEs, right? In most cases. So if we could convince them, it means that we could touch a lot more SMEs.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we've both been involved quite heavily in the UK accounting market, and here is very different to the UK market. The UK market is very developed in terms of tech, and there's lots of things coming out all the time in that market. But here, I don't want to say they're behind. That's unfair, I guess, as a comment, because it's a less developed region in that sense, so they would be behind. But yeah, it does feel like there's a significant amount of opportunity here for digitization.
For sure. And I think it's probably fair. I think it is fair to say that they're behind in terms of the adoption, not behind in any other sense, really, just in terms of adoption of accounting technology. And the UK, I remember when, and I'm sure you do, I remember when the UK was like that, and it wasn't that long ago. It was probably talking about 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
5, 6 years ago, Making Tax Digital came in, and for VAT, and that changed everything. So you had this external regulation that came in and essentially forced the hand of many accountants and SMEs to start taking their accounting more seriously and at least taking the software side of things more seriously, right?
Yeah, and I think I'd just jump in there. I think I took it for granted a little bit because when we started the business 12 years ago, we jumped straight into the cloud. Now, there was still some non-cloud stuff. Like we still had, some Sage clients because we were picking up clients that weren't using cloud, right? So it wasn't, and we weren't quite as aggressive as we are now in terms of you either use Xero or you don't come to us type thing. Like 12 years ago, it was, you've got to be a little bit more flexible. But I think I took it for granted because of that we were so cloud focused that actually for us, it wasn't a big change. And I think obviously a lot of the peers that I was talking to were also quite cloud focused. So I think I was maybe a bit blinkered to the fact that the market wasn't maybe as far forward as I thought it was.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case even over here. So you get some firms that have kind of seen they've seen the future in some ways, right? Maybe they've been exposed to it in other ways, in other markets. Then they come over here and they're able to kind of bring that along. And yeah, it's a completely different conversation that you're having with those kind of firms to the ones that haven't yet necessarily been exposed. So I think there's been a real lack of education in the market here in general. And that's a gap that we're trying to fill to some extent. I think in some of the larger markets or the more developed markets in this space, you've had a lot more of the big software vendors really going after them and educating the market.
Yeah.
They haven't really had that here.
I was just going to say that actually, it's all very well as saying that they're slightly further behind, but part of that is then down to the vendors. They've got a responsibility themselves to bring their products to this market. We love Xero, so I'm not talking bad of them at all, but this isn't a core market for Xero, and therefore the product that they have here is very basic, and that causes people to then maybe think, well, why would I switch to this piece of software called Xero if I can't do all of these great and wonderful things? And for us, coming from the UK market to the UAE market, it is a significantly inferior product here. So do you think the vendors have a responsibility as well to support different regions, or because it's also challenging. They've got limited resources they've got to put somewhere.
It's a real tricky balancing act, and I do have sympathy because I've obviously been on that side of the fence. It is hard to spread your resources and get it right everywhere. So it's absolutely a judgment call, and ultimately they want to make sure that they're in the markets that they feel they can make the biggest impact. They want to make sure they're delivering, right?
Yeah.
So I totally get that side of it. However, yes, that does mean that it's kind of the product is not as good, or it doesn't fulfill its full potential. I would say something like Xero still has immense potential over here and still offers a lot. It offers a different thing to what some of the other products do, but they've all got their pros and cons in all honesty. So it's just about working out what's best for your business. And what we've tried to do here as Scope, so we're Xero ambassadors ourselves, so we still really love the product, even though we operate in its non-core markets. We've tried to plug some of those gaps. So like we're kind of associated with a product from our sister company called Generate Tax, which essentially plugs into Xero to give you those VAT returns, which are localized, right? So we're at least able to try and solve some of these challenges that not having a localized product would give you. But yeah, absolutely. I think any vendors that do give the market priority over here are likely to have a natural edge. But then there's a lot more to it than just having good product market fit.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it was interesting as well. We were both at the Seamless conference a few weeks ago. And I chatted to, I can't remember the name of the company now, but I chatted to one of the kind of expense apps, cards. And we've spoken about it since, but they have the option to forward receipts that you've received on WhatsApp. So for example, as you know and I know here, WhatsApp is the primary business tool effectively, right? And you've got to. My point with saying this is by putting a product out here, it's not good enough to just go, here's our product, use it. It's actually going, well, what is the primary method of business here? Okay, it's WhatsApp. Okay, well, let's build our product which allows people there to use WhatsApp to then load their invoices onto their software. Or do you know what I mean? It's a very different, whereas someone like Dex, for example, who again we use for all of our clients, if we get an invoice on WhatsApp over here, we have to download it and then re-upload it, etc. Whereas if they had a forward from WhatsApp, so I think there's a point around they need to do more, but I think there's also a point around where they say we only want to do more when we really understand the market, if that makes sense.
And that's absolutely it. And it's a bit of a catch-22 in some ways, because you can do all the desktop research you want, right, about a market. There's nothing like empirical data. So when you're there on the ground, what are the clients telling us? What's the market telling us about what's needed? let's try some things out. Let's see what sticks and what doesn't.
Mm.
Because some things like people will put in there that are quite gimmicky and in reality don't really work so well, right? They maybe felt like good ideas at the time, but then in reality don't quite work as you expected them to. But yeah, for sure. I think the WhatsApp one is a great example because it is huge here. Almost all of my business conversations seem to happen over WhatsApp over here.
To an extent where it's actually frustrating sometimes because it's hard to keep track.
Yeah.
Because WhatsApp isn't such designed to be this business. Well, I don't think so anyway. Designed to be, I know there's a WhatsApp business product, but it doesn't feel like it's designed to be this business. And it, in a frustrating kind of way, it also then combines personal and business together. And I don't mean that in a I want to switch off my business versus my personal, but I mean I've then got a load of conversations in my WhatsApp. Some are business, some aren't.
Yeah.
You can't filter between the two as such, you know. So, but yeah, that's a that's a UAE specific thing. But if we talk about accountants then for a minute, what are the primary benefits that you would say to an accountancy firm that is like really starting and consider, you know, in the UAE, they're considering and starting out on this journey and they don't know where to start? You know, what are the primary benefits that you would say, and where would you obviously point them to scope, but where would you point them to in terms of where to look initially around products and things like that?
Yeah, so I would say, look, if lots of your clients are still on desktop-based software or spreadsheets or, heaven forbid, some paper ledgers, I'm sure are still out there somewhere, if not in people's heads. What you want to think about is accessibility. So lots of your team traditionally, let's say pre-COVID world, right? I hate to use that word, but pre-COVID world, everyone was often in the same office at the same time.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we've got more distributed teams, people working in different locations. Also, with like the rise in, say, back offices in other regions, right, where you might outsource some of the work to a back office in another region, often in like Indian subcontinent or in Southeast Asia or somewhere like that, right? So you're not necessarily going to have the people that are working on the books next to you all the time. Right, so if you've got everything in one place, it's not ideal. Having a cloud-based software means that someone can access it from anywhere, right? And you can be working on the same thing at the same time in different places, which is amazing. One big advantage. The next advantage, I would say, is getting all the latest updates, right? So traditionally, you would get a CD with a certain version of, let's say, a green desktop software that you might have, and you might put it in, and then eventually that's going to be outdated. So you're going to want the next version. So you would have had to fork out for another upgrade, right? You pay for another upgrade and go through a whole process. The great thing about SaaS software, cloud-based software in general, is it tends to be updated on the fly, and you don't even know about it until like you get a notification something's been updated or that something's coming. So it just happens. So you're almost going to be in the latest software, which is a really cool thing. And finally, what I would say is, in terms of benefits, is also staff and getting the best staff in. It's something that I think is often overlooked. Sometimes some of the older software that you're working with isn't that appealing and not that challenging. It's not. The younger generation tends to favor software that has a certain feel to it, more intuitive, more with the times.
Yeah.
And actually, to find good staff that can still support the old stuff, you know, they're not going to be trained on this old stuff anymore. They're going to be trained on the latest technology often.
And you find that as well here, because obviously, you know, here the staff, if you like, are used to the older software, whereas, you know, we definitely find from the UK side that when we're hiring in the UK, you know, people like talking to us from an initial kind of hiring process because they can see that we're a forward-thinking, modern firm and whatnot. But, you know, over here, because the market is more old school, let's call it.
Yeah.
Are the staff trained enough, and therefore do they actually know, these staff, what the possibilities are with the new tech and things?
I think probably locally, it's a fair call that it's probably not quite there. There are some people out there that know, like, your QuickBooks Online, your Xeros, your Zohos. I think there's a lot of people now that do know these bits of software. But yes, there probably have been still exposed to the old software at this stage. Now that will change in the next few years, because we saw that that's been happening in the UK. So I'd say it's a matter of, do you want to future-proof your practice? That's a good call to make. I'd say if you really aren't thinking medium long term and you're thinking about what benefits is it going to be today, I'd say that the third biggest one in that case is the app ecosystem that surrounds the accounting. So getting your books digitalized and in the cloud is one thing. Beyond that, there's a lot more benefits to be had when you're on cloud-based software. If you think of like the ecosystems of Xero and QuickBooks in particular, they've got huge ecosystems of thousands of third-party apps that integrate. It just means that if you're limited by what the bookkeeping software can do alone, that there's almost no more limits with all these other third-party apps that integrate somewhat seamlessly with them in terms of what more value your practice can get internally in terms of efficiency and the value offerings that you can give to your clients, but also to what your clients can do. Because let's face it, like the accounting is one thing for them, but it's a necessary thing. What's going to really make a huge difference to their daily operations is software that actually maybe integrates with their accounting, but actually helps them out with their operations, right? What they're actually doing. And that could be, if you're running a warehouse, something to help manage all your stock, for example.
Yeah. And I think we spoke about it when we did that accounting event recently, but I remember I worked for a manufacturing business a fairly long time ago now, and they use Sage 500 or something like that. So, an enterprise version, if you like, of the Sage product. But Sage didn't allow for export of certain data in certain formats. So we basically had a team, we had an IT department, and within that there was 2 or 3 people that their job really was to get data out of Sage and put it in a format that management could use.
Yeah.
And that, people look at something like Xero and they go, well, it doesn't do inventory that well, or it doesn't do this that well, or it doesn't do that well. But nor does Sage, and I'm not trying to be, slating other products, but like nor does the old desktop software, maybe I should phrase it, that you think does all those things. It actually doesn't, and you end up needing to plug these things in anyway. You just do it in a different way, and I think that's the key thing, like you say, with a Xero, QuickBooks, etc., where they go, well, actually, rather than you hiring somebody to build these integrations, here's an app store, and within this app store you can get whatever you want and plug in.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you make there about what we often look for in new software when we're evaluating new software is, can it do exactly what I do now? But often the reason why you do what you do now is because the software that you had worked that way.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily because that's the best way to do things. So often when you look at this, it's not just a software change. We want to evaluate how we're doing things. I think it's often a really good opportunity to think about how should this business process work in an ideal way, and does this software help me do that better?
No, I agree, and we quite often say to people when they come to the business, we're doing this like this, and this is our process, but when you're doing it, if you've got a better idea or if you've got a suggestion, bring that to the table. Because if you've seen something that we maybe haven't seen, or you've done this in this way before and it's been really great, we're all open to that. So yeah, I agree. It's a mindset shift as well as a software kind of tooling shift as well, I think. So
for sure.
In terms of the market itself, then where do you see the UAE at the moment in terms of the small business market? And obviously we've got things like VAT came out 5-6 years ago. Corporate tax is now here. So I guess accountants and businesses have got maybe more requirements to file, tax returns and stuff, but also, maybe more requirement for collaboration between accountants and clients rather than that once a year, here's my books, sign them off and move on. There's a little bit more kind of regular, I guess, communication. So where do you see the market at the moment in terms of the tech tools? Are there good tech tools being built here, being brought to the market here? Yeah, where do you see the market at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. So look, I think in terms of adoption of the tech that's been around for a while, so let's just think about initially the cloud accounting software. It's been here for a while. Lots of people know about it. Some people have adopted it for some of their clients. Often their clients will come to them and say, I want to use this, or I'm already using this. Can you support me? And they'll just say yes. So lots of businesses and accounting firms are supporting the software. What they haven't done is necessarily change their internal workflows to really take full advantage of it.
Okay.
Right? So if you're doing accounting in the traditional way or the way you've always done it and haven't really shifted to a more seamless workflow, a digital workflow, you're not necessarily going to get the full benefits. So there's one thing adopting the software, the other thing actually embedding it into your ways of working.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And I think that's what's really lacking here. So for example, like you could say, well, we're using Xero already. Okay, but what are you doing for data capture? Oh, we've still got people typing up all the invoices and receipts. And that's like 95% of the market, at least, I would say, are not using OCR technology yet.
And that's really interesting, because just to jump in there, I actually think as a data capture tool, Zero is a slower tool than a Sage. You used to have that screen on, say, Sage, where you'd have, you'd type the line, enter next line, type the line, next line. Like, you could actually enter data, I say quickly, for manual entry, it was fairly quick. But Zero is actually quite a cumbersome process to add an invoice and then approve and then do the next one. And so you may end up, by using cloud software, take more time.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that I'm encouraging you use a desktop, but the whole idea is like you need to look beyond, and not just adapt part of the tool. Let's look at the full thing. Using OCR technology, we've seen, is a huge time saver for firms.
Just to jump in there, for those that don't know what OCR is,
it's optical character recognition. It's essentially taking paper documents or even soft copies of documents and extracting the key data from it. So this could be your invoices, your bills, receipts, these kind of things, and taking out the important stuff that an accounting system would need. What you then have to do is, after it reads some of the stuff, you need to teach it the first time for each vendor often how to code it up for your accounting software. And then the next time it sees the same supplier bill, it knows how to deal with it. And then that's where you get the efficiencies. So like, for example, when I started out here, I was doing my own books because I wanted to really get into the weeds of the business. So I put through I was using Kareem quite a lot, which is like an Uber, getting around, and they'll often send me an invoice or receipt afterwards to my email. So I sent the first one through, I coded up as travel, sent it across to Zero as a draft bill, and then the next time I sent 10 across, and they immediately went through in a few seconds, right? So it doesn't take long to get the benefits from each supplier, and then multiply that across all your suppliers, multiply that across all your clients, and you're easily saving 80 to 90% of data entry time.
And not only that, I think as well, the supplier rules.
Yes.
That's another really, you look at, like you say, you talk about Kareem as an example. You tell it that every time you see a Kareem invoice, for example, you code it to travel, and you post it automatically into Zero. So then you are literally then just forwarding that, or taking a picture of whatever it is and saying, do the job for me, please.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'd say at the very least, you're changing a data entry and review and posting job to a review and posting job. And in the best case, you're taking out the whole review. You're so confident, and you've done it so many times, or you've programmed it in that way. So yeah, that's a huge saving. So that's one example, I say, of, in general here, how they've adopted cloud accounting, but not really to its full extent. So that's one area. I would say then beyond that, there's not necessarily people that have the knowledge or the time to figure out what are the right tools for them. And we see in the UK, for example, lots of firms have got specialists in the team that are actually kind of scanning. You see this kind of cloud champion role come up. I haven't seen that here yet.
Yeah, we're actually developing one of our. We've never had a specific cloud champion, but we are now developing one of our team. His role will be to be that cloud champion, and he will be the one that tests out the new tools, that that makes sure the processes are going through properly, builds the relationships with the Zeros, the decks, the scopes, etc. that we work with, to really kind of build that, and then train the team as well. That's the other thing. We're using a new bit of software in the UK at the moment called Cresco, a bill payment software. And I said to him yesterday, because he's tried it out with the team, blah, blah, blah. And I said to him yesterday, I need to understand how it works, just because I'm interested as to how the whole process works. And he was like, yep, I'm doing a team training tomorrow, join the team training. And so my point is that we've now got someone dedicated, like you say, and that is really important, I think, that kind of, cloud champion, but also I'm thinking like advocate for that.
It's the role's important, whether you want to have that in-house or whether you want to work with someone like us, right? Because that's what we've recognized, is that accounting firms and SMEs just don't have the time, frankly, to get across these thousands of apps.
Or the understanding. And that's not a criticism.
No, but it's not their area of expertise, right? Like and rightly so. You should be focusing on what your clients are demanding from you, from a compliance, from an advisory perspective, whatever it might be that you want to focus on. That's the expertise that we like to bring in, and that's where we feel we complement firms quite nicely.
Yeah, I agree. We are a pretty cloud focused and positive business, but we still work with you because there is still support and value that you guys can add. And it's funny because we talk about an outsourced CFO or an outsourced CMO or an outsourced whatever. Now maybe there's that outsourced cloud champion, that outsourced cloud specialist.
Yeah, we're like a tech partner. That's how we like to see ourselves.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on here is bank feeds.
Yes.
Because as a UK accountant, bank feeds are probably one of the greatest things that was brought out. And I know that sounds silly and basic, but it just makes everything a lot simpler.
Yes.
It means you can be much more, proactive with the data. It means you can get things done quicker. Now having a UAE business that doesn't have bank feeds, it is a bit more messy. You then upload data as CSVs. Then they've got the risk of duplicates. And, do you see that part of the market? Have you spoken to Xero? Have you spoken to any of the banks? Like, do you see that part of the market moving, or is it an issue around open banking here? Like, what's...
Yeah, so the bank... So we don't have open banking here. That's the first point. So, and we didn't in the UK. So in the UK, even before open banking, there was some direct feeds. Xero made a lot of effort to try and...
You had to pay for those, though.
Yeah, you did have to pay for them often, in most cases, I believe. But open banking came in and it just changed everything, right? Now, that hasn't come out here yet. I'm sure it will. I know that I think Saudi Arabia's already got some open banking legislation coming. The banks haven't yet all implemented open APIs, but it'll come to the UAE for sure. Now, some of the banks are already making some noise around this. So I know, so although there's no direct feeds to my knowledge today with Xero, I believe Zoho might have a couple.
Okay.
There are other bank feeds which are not, so you get direct feeds, which are like the ideal one, because it's where the bank and the accounting software essentially got a direct connection with one another.
Yeah.
You then get these other kind of ones which are facilitated by a third party, so like an intermediary in the middle. Often it will kind of do some kind of screen scraping of some kind. So this is where it's essentially trying to look at your online banking and pull out the details.
It used to be Yodlee.
Exactly, yeah, Yodlee. I think they still operate here. So you do still get some feeds here.
Okay.
They're not as reliable, I would say, as a direct feed. So a direct feed is the Nirvana. Now, Wafik, which is another local client cloud accounting software over here, which was born kind of in the region, they have got a direct bank feed with Weo Bank. So Weo Bank is one of the neobanks in the region. So they've recently launched a bank feed there. That's a really positive sign.
And that's a full direct
full direct feed, with Weo Bank. So that's a really positive sign, because it means that, once they've done it, it's likely, I think, we'll start to see it getting built to other software platforms.
Yeah, somebody actually said to me about some of this is around data security and privacy and storage of data, and where the servers are that are holding the data. And probably someone like Wafek, who are based here or who have been born from here, maybe are holding their data in UAE servers in some kind, whereas maybe Xero is still holding it outside of the UAE. And somebody said that, from a financial perspective, the governments here, Saudi Arabia, all these kind of GCC countries are very conscious of data security and things, and that it will require businesses like Xero, for example, to hold that data in the region that they're operating in. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how easy that is. But that's something that I heard recently around why it's a bit slower process. But it's good to hear that it started, as you said, because if it starts, it means that we can do more. We can build on that. If it hasn't started, it suggests we're a million miles away.
Yeah, and I know from the experience in Xero UK, but also we've seen this in other markets. Once you get one bank on, the others start to get FOMO. Now the advantage that Weo had is that they were born as a digital bank.
Yeah, right? Like a Starling, Revolut, Monzo.
Exactly. Type. So like they have the advantage of starting out on modern infrastructure and architecture, right? So they were able to probably quite easily, I imagine, build the right APIs for this.
Yeah.
Some of the more traditional banks don't necessarily have that. So they've got a bigger job. It's a bigger project. They're often larger organizations, a bit more red tape to get through to get these kind of things approved. So they'll want to see it somewhere else first. And you kind of rely on someone just having that vision internally that's going to kind of sign on the dotted line and get these things going to go.
Because I think it was a Revolut, Monzo, Starling type product that was the first kind of, let's call them proper direct feeds in the UK, and then it was the HSBCs. And I remember signing those forms with NatWest and HSBC. And you'd pay your £3-4 a month, whatever it was, to get the bank feed, and You know, it was, even then though, it was funny because like we sit here now and we go, bank feeds are essential and we expect them for free. But back then, and I'm, say back then, 6, 7, whatever years ago, we were more than happy to pay for that. And sometimes we didn't even charge the client. If we didn't think that the client would be open to it because they didn't get the value of it, we'd pay that fee because it was so much value to us as a business. So, we expect all these things for free now. But, I remember when,
They weren't. Yeah, no, for sure. And so one point I would make about, let's say, in the absence of bank feeds, what else can be done? If your online bank has the option of downloading a CSV file, or often they have some other file formats, often your accounting software will also accept those. So in the absence of having a direct bank feed, actually just downloading that CSV and uploading it into your accounting software is better than having to manually type up from PDF bank statements
100%.
or even going through an OCR route.
Yeah.
You can do the OCR route as well. That's the third best thing I would say after the bank feeds. But yeah, manual entry is rarely required these days, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess, moving just onto the advisory piece, it was something that it was a buzzword in the UK for a while around offer advisory. And I don't think a lot of people knew what advisory really was, but they were told they had to offer it. So they said they were offering it. And, these tools came out with automated cash flows, which I thought were horrendous because they just didn't work properly. And, it went to a point where they were trying to it felt like they were trying to take away the personal touch of what advisory really is. If firms over here are wanting to come away from compliance and get more into advisory, like where, and I mean the true sense of advisory, but where would you say they start? Let's assume that they've got an element of cloud, zero and maybe a DEX to give them a base point. Like where would you then recommend they start from that advisory piece?
Firstly, you want to create capacity within the team to be able to look at this stuff, because often people are just kind of caught up in the weeds and in the day-to-day. So streamline your practice as much as possible. Get the OCR bit in. I keep banging on about it, but get that bit done. Automate as much as possible so that you've got capacity, and then identify maybe some people in the team that either have done this advisory role in the past or they can be upskilled to it. And then you start dabbling with it, right? Now, I would say looking at one of the reporting apps is a really good place to start, because if you can have an app that can pull out more insights than, let's say, what you would get on the bog standard reports in the cloud accounting software, that's a really good place to start. And there's examples like you've got your Fathoms, your Spotlights, your Sifts. We work really closely with Sift at the moment, but there's lots of examples of these kind of softwares that will give you insights. Now it's about you as an advisor and your knowledge of the market, but also of your clients, that turns it just from data, another data point, because that's all it is really. It's a data point, from data into really actionable insights that will benefit the business. It's probably a muscle that you need to kind of flex often to get better at it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, and I haven't been on that side of it, but just from the feedback I've got from having worked with lots of firms over the years, I can't imagine it's something that you're always going to have figured out from day one.
Yeah.
What's been your experience of it?
Yeah, no,
I
agree. My background was management accounting. That's what I trained in. I trained in industry. I trained, working closely with the directors and the owners of the business on, financial advisory information so they could make decisions like that. Ultimately, one of the businesses I worked at, cash wasn't there. Cash wasn't king in their case. And every day I had to do a cash flow report, which I presented every morning to the owners of the business to show, where the cash flow was looking, the projections we were looking at. Now, as much as that was quite an extreme, and that was done in spreadsheets and stuff, but as much as that was quite a extreme job, it was advisory. I was sitting in front of the owners of the business, the directors of the business that needed to make decisions, and I was providing them with information that helped them make those decisions. I didn't make it for them, but I provided them the information, and then they would ask questions, and I would then give them some feedback, and ultimately then we will get to a decision at the end of it. So for me, that is the core part of what advisory is. It's here's the data, and let's have a talk around this data. What does it look like? What does it show? How does it feel? And then it's making decisions around that data and being able to give advice and guidance around it. The key thing for me back then, if I look at it, that would have made that job better is to make it more efficient.
Yeah.
I had to manually log into the bank account. I had to check what came in the bank. I had to check what was paid, put it in my spreadsheet. it would take me, I'm making it up because it was a long time ago, but it would take me an hour a day or whatever, right, to do that. If all of that part was automated for me, that I woke up in the morning, I went to the office, I pressed 3 buttons, and within 10 minutes the report was updated, then I had time to look at it. I then had, say, 50 minutes to then look at that report before I then went downstairs and spoke to the directors and told them. Whereas I had to spend all that time preparing it, So I'd go into the meeting and saying, here's the data I prepared, but I haven't had time to look at it.
Yeah. And this is often the case, right? Like we do get really busy. So if you're getting busy doing things that can be automated, like it doesn't make sense, because we're always going to be busy. If you're a hard worker in general, you want to do a good job, you're always going to find something to do. So wouldn't you rather that was something that only you can do, or that can't be automated by a machine? Like it just doesn't make sense to do something that can be automated.
And also from job security, if all I was doing was taking data from the bank account and putting it in a spreadsheet, actually, where was my value?
Yeah.
Where to that business, where was that value? Whereas if I was the one analyzing that every morning and going into that meeting and saying, these are the 3 key points that I think we need to discuss this morning, and these are why I think we need to discuss them, all of a sudden they're now saying, well, you're a super valuable asset to this business, Joe. I'm really glad you're here. So I think that's the other thing. If you're an individual within a business, you're either in the company or you are within an accounting firm, you can really set yourself apart by being the one that says, well, I'm not going to do this manually. I'm going to automate this part, and then I'm going to be able to add value here, which is going to show when we have conversations with clients and stuff.
And you just reminded me about a really good point about this whole advisory thing in general. So one thing that I hear from lots of accounting firms is that, particularly here, they're involved in somewhat a race to the bottom with other accounting firms. It's become hyper competitive. The fact that corporate taxes come here means that there's a bit of a land grab opportunity, because SMEs are now starting to take their accounting seriously for the first time. So they're looking for accountants. Now, if all you're doing is just producing VAT returns and maybe just the corporate tax returns now, then it's likely that there's thousands of other practices that can also do exactly that.
100%.
So how sticky is that relationship? How valuable are you to that business? It's hard to differentiate when all you're doing is what everyone else can do. At the moment, very few firms here are using enough of the tools that they have at their disposal that are available to be able to really make the advisory piece as easy as possible. It's likely that they are spending hours, if not days, extracting data, putting it into Excel, manipulating it to be able to get to that point, if they're even doing that. Because it's a big job, and they're very busy. They've got lots of clients. They've got clients that don't probably value them as much, and 100%. They're paying a lot less. So I really see it as the biggest opportunity here to differentiate yourself is to be able to offer more value than others can. And because hardly anyone's doing it, adopt the tools to become more efficient, adopt the tools that can help with the advisory piece, give you the data points so that you can spend the time and just offer that new service line, which doesn't take you hours and hours and days to kind of prepare for.
Yeah, so I want to just touch on that for a second, then I want to move on to one last point before we look to close out. But my only, I guess, caveat to that would be, being a firm that's already here that is cloud focused, do you not think though that if the client doesn't value an accountant, it's very hard for the firm to sell higher value services? Because and the reason I say that is because, if I go and speak to a client today and then another firm over here goes and speaks to the client, and that client doesn't value accounting because they haven't seen what real accounting can look like, they are literally going to go, it's great that you're offering all these wonderful things over here, Joe, but actually these guys are a lot cheaper. I don't know what they are. So I think there's also a messaging piece around in the UAE, as an example, the GCC region that we want to expand into more, is that we are, because we've done that in the UK as a peer group. Accountants have told everybody what their value is, and people really do understand now, I think, in the most cases, the value of a good accountant in the UK and what they can provide. I don't think they know that here. So I think it's not just about the firms being able to offer advisory services. It's also an educational piece to the community or whatever, that of the value that accountants can offer.
100%. And that's why we're here to try and educate the market on this. I'd say we're super early on that whole kind of adoption bell curve thing. So we are early, but people that are early, that get in early, can actually really benefit from this.
And I think you're right. Corporate tax has been a good thing from an accounting perspective because it's added more requirement for or necessity for an accountant, but it's also been a bad thing in that it's kind of caused a race to the bottom commodity type product. I need an accountant. I'm just going to go for the cheapest because I don't value them. So yeah, it's a bit of both. So I guess the last thing I want to touch on, and I don't know how much experience you have or haven't had in this space, but is just around the AI piece. I've been speaking to a few firms recently who are, when I say firms, I mean tech firms that are looking to bring AI into accounting. And an example that I want to give you is Dext OCR. Great, we talked about it earlier, fantastic, but it's very limited to what OCR can do, what OCR can read and whatnot. Wouldn't it be great if AI could be involved and say, well, actually, not only can I read what it says, but I can take context into play here. So I can read that it says this invoice is for a period that is in the future because I know the context of the date we are now and what, so therefore I'm going to put it to prepayments. Or I know that this supplier sends you a rent invoice, a service charge invoice, and a utilities invoice in 3 different invoices. If I'm just OCR, I'm always using the most frequent one or what have you. If I'm AI, I can say, well, I know that's rent, I know that's service charge. Are you seeing much development in AI? I know we've said that the UAE isn't that far forward in terms of cloud tech, so I'm assuming AI is slightly behind that. But as a global perspective as well, are you seeing AI being used in accounting yet, or not really?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was like a big theme in lots of the accounting shows over in the UK recently as well. So you're starting to see lots of AI kind of bookkeeping tools in general where they
like what I said.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they'll look at what you've been doing. So it's like a machine learning element, right? So it'll look at historically, how have you been doing things, and use that to inform how it might code things to help with the bookkeeping, the reconciliation. So it can speed up a lot of the stuff that you can do. And initially, at least it's speeding up the initial doing bit, and then you're reducing the job down to review bit. That's already happening. We're seeing a few players emerge in that space. The other side of it is, so we've got OCR and hearing this new term, which is ICR, which I'm pretty sure stands for Intelligent Character Recognition. So this is where you're embedding artificial intelligence into the OCR. And it's doing some of the things that you're talking about. It'll take context into play, but also it's learning from a bigger data set. So it's trying to figure out what have you done in the past more, and it maybe has a broader reach. And it's been designed more so that it can take into more factors into account when making a decision about how to code things up. So it's just more about suggesting more things and making it life even easier for people that are doing those jobs. It's a new space for sure, but we are seeing some emerging players in that space already come through. It's all about now testing them. So we're already starting to try out these bits of software to make sure that. No, for sure. We have to. Like, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't trying this stuff out. So we are trying it out. They're still really early in the journeys, I would say. So, but there's products in market that have already launched. So we're trying them out. We're seeing how well these things work. But the results so far have been really, really encouraging. So yeah, I think there's lots of optimism to be had about AI coming into the accounting space. We're also seeing AI come into the advisory space, which is, I'd say, riskier and more nascent. So maybe it can help suggest, provide some extra insights. I can't see it in the short or medium term replacing accountants anytime soon. And it won't have enough depth or context, I think. And we've got to remember how AI works. AI works by it being fed data and seeing how things have happened. So initially, while it's new, the data set just simply won't be big enough for it to be able to come up with enough suggestions that are meaningful. That's where the accountants and their experience comes in.
Yeah, I agree. And I've said for a long time that I don't think AI replaces accountants. I think AI replaces processes that accountants have, but I don't think it replaces accountants. I also think AI I use it sometimes if I've got a PDF of 15 pages and I go, summarize the key points of this PDF for me. Like, you could do that with a set of accounts. You could put a set of accounts in PDF format on an AI platform, and you could say, give me the key revenue, the highest costs, and something else, right? And it would be able to pull that data out and give you that. So I think there's definitely those sorts of things that I agree. Again, it comes back to making the accountant's job easier to then highlight those bits, so you can then go and delve into the data. But I agree with you. I use COVID as an example because if on the 15th of March or whatever the date was, around I think we went into lockdown in the UK on like the 20 something of March, right, in 2020. Let's say the 15th, 16th, 17th, something like that of March, you asked an AI tool to build you out a financial model. It would have built a very different model to reality, right? Now, the human in the world would have been able to know that whilst they didn't know a lockdown was going to happen, they did know that a lockdown had happened in Italy. They did know that, that this virus was spreading significantly around the world. And they may have therefore been more prudent in their decision making because of human beings being able to react to that situation. I'm not saying I'm not an AI expert, and I'm not saying it can never do that, but I do think that's a really good example of what AI may not then get right, or may give you an incorrect view
or assessment of risk, right? Because also, if you know your client, right, you're probably going to have a good, hopefully you've got a good relationship with the client, and you may know things about them and their personal circumstances. Let's face it, if you're working with SMEs, you're often working with just people here. They're not huge corporations like faceless organizations, right? These are people, and often small businesses, right? It's very personal. So you might understand more about that business and to really help them make a better decision and provide more meaningful advice than any AI would ever be able to.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, for me, it's a huge opportunity, but it's a huge opportunity to help build the industry rather than take away from the industry.
100%.
So yeah, that's been. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. We've both been in the space for a long time, so but I'm conscious that we've probably been chatting for kind of 45 minutes or so. So look, for people, I guess businesses, SMEs, but also accounting firms that want your services, like what sort of services are you going to offer to them? Why should they come to you? But then also, how do they find you?
Yeah, so you can find us. So I'm all over LinkedIn at the moment. I'm trying to do a bit of work on that, and it seems to be going okay over here.
Talking about Habibis.
Yeah, all about Habibis, yeah. So you'll get sick of that word if you follow me, but please do anyway. No one seems to have got sick of it yet. At least, although maybe there are some people that unfollowed me. I wouldn't know. I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
But no, in general, like, if you go on our website, so scopesolutions.ae for the UAE, we're also available in Malta and in Cyprus, and we will cover other markets as well. These are like our core markets where we're on the ground, but these days you can work remotely, right? So I'd say if any of your listeners do want help with either just the cloud accounting software, but also making their accounting practices more efficient, whether it's helping look at the practice management side of it and proposal management and reporting, or if your clients have needs that go beyond accounting, right, be it inventory or e-commerce or job costing, whatever it might be, it's likely that we've come across something. So feel free to reach out to me either directly on LinkedIn or go on our website, and more than happy to help.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ayman. We'll post all your links and stuff in the description so people can find you. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and look forward to chatting soon.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers,
Appreciate
mate. Thank you.